Hi, I'm Bob Morwell, pastor of Union United Methodist Church in Quincy, Illinois, and this is episode 2 of CyberBible 2.0, our weekly online Bible study. If you would like to use an online version of the Bible, I recommend this link, Bible Gateway. Bible Gateway offers several English versions of the Scriptures and offers them also in several other languages. I will normally use the New International Version of the Bible. We're starting with the first chapter of the Gospel according to Luke. As I noted in our first episode, Luke opens by addressing someone called Theophilus. This may have been a particular individual by that name. However, since the term translates as God lover, it may have meant anyone who loved God and wished to know more about Jesus and the beliefs and history of the early Christian movement. Luke notes in his brief preface that others have also endeavored to produce written histories of the Christian movement. In verses 3 and 4 he writes, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things that you have been taught. Which pretty clearly indicates that Luke had access to other written resources about Jesus, which predated his gospel, which was most likely written between 62 and 67 AD. One of these prior sources was the Gospel according to Mark, which early church historians said was written by a man named John Mark, who had served as the Apostle Peter's secretary when Peter was in Rome, and who recorded Peter's memories of Jesus as the apostle shared them in sermons and in conversations. Luke actually takes up the story before Jesus' birth. Of the 4 Gospels, only 2, Luke's and Matthew's, deal with the circumstances surrounding the birth of Jesus. The oldest Gospel, Mark, and the last of the Gospels, John, make no mention of his birth, childhood, or earlier adult life. The Apostle Paul also makes no mention of Jesus' birth. His letters actually predate the Gospels. The oldest of his letters is probably 1 Thessalonians, which was penned around 51 AD, perhaps 15 years before Luke's Gospel. His letters do not appear in chronological order in the New Testament, but rather in their order of length. We don't know the source of either Luke's or Matthew's accounts of the conception and birth of Jesus. Luke's story is unique in its claim that Jesus and John the Baptist were actually blood relatives, and he begins with the story of how John came to be. We're told that his father Zechariah is a descendant of the ancient priest Abijah. Centuries earlier, King David had divided the priestly caste into 24 groups, descended from various priests, including Abijah, and these groups or divisions alternated in tending to the tasks of operating and maintaining the great temple in Jerusalem. His wife Elizabeth is also described as coming from a priestly family. We're told that they're childless, both quite old, although their ages are never revealed. We tend to depict them as quite aged and rather decrepit, but they simply could have been in their 40s, which would have been pretty late in the game for child-rearing by the standards of that time. Luke says that Zechariah was chosen by Lot to offer up incense in one of the holiest precincts of the temple, considered by the Jews to be the holiest place on earth. In Hebrew, it was called Beit HaMikdash, the dwelling place of God on earth. Zechariah is burning incense when the archangel Gabriel appears to him and tells him that he and his wife Elizabeth will have a child. They are to name him John, Yohanan in Hebrew, which means God is gracious. He's instructed that the boy is never to take wine or fermented drink. This indicates that he is to be a Nazirite, which is not to be confused with Nazarene, which is someone like Jesus from the town of Nazareth. A Nazirite was someone who was especially consecrated to the service of God. A Nazirite vow included 3 requirements: abstention from alcohol and even from grapes or raisins, since they could ferment into alcohol, not cutting one's hair, and yes, Samson was a Nazirite, and avoiding any close contact with the dead. Many people would take Nazirite vows for a specific period of time, but others were dedicated from birth by their parents, often as a show of gratitude for having the child in the first place. People having difficulty bearing children would sometimes offer to make any child God gave them a Nazirite, and so it would not have seemed strange for Zechariah to dedicate John as one. But the degree of John's dedication was to go further. In verses 16 and 17, the angel declares, He will bring back many people of Israel to the Lord their God. He will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the parents to their children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. For centuries, the Jewish people had expected the coming of a mysterious and miraculous figure known as the Mashiach, the Messiah, the term which means anointed or chosen one. And frankly, the job description of the Messiah was never that precise, but it was expected that this figure would usher in a new age of justice, peace, and righteousness. Many expected him to restore Israel to its former political greatness and more. Others saw him as a figure who would redeem and save the whole world, including non-Jews. How this was to be accomplished was even less clear. But another part of the expectation was that the first of the great Old Testament prophets, Elijah, would return in some form and announce the imminent arrival of God's chosen one. The angel says that John will act in the spirit of Elijah to prepare the people for the coming of the Lord. This is a triple whammy for the flummoxed Zechariah. He's about to get a totally unexpected child. The child is to be the new Elijah, and apparently the Messiah is about to arrive. Small wonder the old boy responds with some skepticism. Zechariah asked the angel, "How can I be sure of this? I'm an old man, and my wife is well along in years." Well, the Bible isn't exactly known for its humor, but what follows is a tad funny. Gabriel gets into quite a snit and indignantly retorts, "I'm Gabriel! I stand in the presence of God, and I've been sent to speak to you and tell you this good news, you doofus!" Okay, he didn't use the doofus part, but you get the general gist. A man like Zechariah would have spent his whole life praying for the coming of the Messiah. He would have spent most of his life praying for a child, and in that culture he would have prayed especially for a son. The irony is that the longer we wait for something, the less willing we are to believe we're about to get it. We acclimate ourselves to disappointment when God doesn't work according to our schedules and agendas. I recall 20 years ago when people who had spent their lives working and praying for the end of the Soviet Empire were among the last to believe it was really happening, and without a mushroom cloud in sight. I recall a number of very conservative pundits who kept assuring us that Gorbachev must have some kind of devious, sinister, secret master plan which he was carrying out to lull us into a false sense of security, even as the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union itself were clearly unraveling before our eyes. Ironically, they seemed to believe more in the resilience of the communists than the communists themselves did. I even recall some people earlier expressing concern when a priest from communist Poland became pope. Could he be a secret agent planted to subvert the church? Instead, he became the harbinger of communism's fall. Gabriel responds to Zechariah's doubts by rendering him speechless until the child is born. Objection overruled. He goes home and dutifully impregnates Elizabeth, who proceeds to gestate the expected baby boy. At this point, the focus shifts to a young relative of Elizabeth who is living in a hillbilly town called Nazareth in Galilee. Her name is Mary. She was likely an illiterate peasant girl of about 14 years of age when she gave birth to the most important figure in human history. We'll pick up there in the next installment of CyberBible 2.0. You can find each installment here on YouTube, and you can link to them through our website right here. Or you can link to them through our Facebook page here. And remember, this is an interactive study. Feel free to post questions and comments, and I'll be glad to respond as quickly and thoroughly as possible. I'm Bob Morwell, pastor of Union United Methodist Church in Quincy, Illinois. Thanks for watching, and tune in to the next episode of CyberBible 2.0.